Welcome to The Friday Habit with Mark Labriola and Benjamin Manley. The Friday Habit is for small business owners, freelancers, and creatives who are ready to take their business to the next level. Join us as we discover how to apply the strategies we learn to grow our businesses, make more money, and live every day like it's Friday. And welcome back to another Friday Habit. I am your host, Mark Labriola II. And Benjamin Manley is not with us today. He is somewhere in Europe, I believe. He was in Ireland. Now he's somewhere else. And next time he's on the show, we'll get an update. But today we have a great guest. We have Trixie Castro, and she is a super dynamic entrepreneur with over 2 decades of experience, having founded and invested in more than 50 companies across various industries. As a visionary leader and member of the Forbes Finance Council, she is passionate about empowering individuals, especially women, to excel in their entrepreneurial pursuits throughout mindset transformation and practical strategies. Welcome, Trixie, to the Friday Habit.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Little tech issues in the beginning, but isn't that how it always ends up?
Always. It's our new world. I love it.
Exactly. Well, gosh, your background looks awesome. I love that wall that's kind of like blue, but also gray and black. And I don't know, it's kind of an optical illusion, but it looks very like mysterious, which I like.
Thank you. I was actually just looking at your background. It's very cool with instruments and stuff. Very cool.
Yeah, it's a little homage to all the different things in my past. So, yeah. And where are you based out of? Where are you living these days?
Just outside of LA.
Okay.
In Westlake Village. Mm-hmm.
So you got that, LA vibe going, and the weather's nice, but you got traffic and lots of homeless.
Yes, exactly. We definitely have our work cut out for us, for sure.
Yeah.
Where I live is actually really small and very sleepy town, and everyone's in bed by 9 p.m.
Nice.
So anytime I leave here, I'm like, what? People go to dinner at 9? What?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. We kind of live right outside of Denver, but there is a college, Denver University, that's close by. It's like 10 minutes. And so if you ever like feeling the vibe for maybe some hummus and some falafels, you can like go there. This place is open to like 2 a.m. So, that's always nice.
Awesome.
But hey, so one of the things I was interested in is your first generation. Mm-hmm. And I was just curious about that. My wife, it's funny because she's a first generation on her dad's side. Her dad's from Iran, and then she's like a 4th generation Coloradan on her mom's side. But I'd love to hear a little bit about, like growing up. Where is your family from originally?
Cuba.
Okay.
So my parents came here from Cuba, and my last name is Castro. No relation. It's very popular there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was an incredible experience. They came here really kind, loving people, hardworking people, but definitely not of an entrepreneurial mindset, right? It was like, how do we put food on the table? But yet my mom's actions, if you will, were very entrepreneurial. She was very much a go-getter. And I saw that kind of demonstrated throughout my life. And it was kind of funny. I was talking to someone earlier, and they said to me, how were you first exposed to real estate and finance, right?
Yeah.
Kind of 2 really unique pieces. And I thought about it for a second, and I said, it's interesting. I hadn't kind of connected the dots till recently. I remember my mom, when I was 3 years old, went in for a job interview for this lovely immigrant family. They were here from Italy. The husband had built a bank in America and invested his money in real estate. Anyway, my mom gets stuck having to take me to the interview with her. And she was like, Trixie, do not talk, do not say anything, just sit there. And,
Right.
And I remember she was like so nervous. She was like doing this with her hands. And I remember like jumping in to have to close it for her. And I was like, you guys need to hire my mom. And they were like, okay, well, why? Sure. I said, because you guys have the most beautiful house I've ever seen, and that yard needs kids to play in it. So I need to be here. And, but it's really funny because, we were what they would call live-in, right? So we lived in their guest house for many years, and we didn't even own a home until I was 14 and they had passed. But it was one of the greatest experiences of my life because although she was ill and had Alzheimer's disease, I was exposed to more, right? And I was exposed to a very entrepreneurial vibe of her and her husband coming in as immigrants with like $2 in their pocket and going and making something with it. And I remember thinking, well, whatever they did, I need to go figure out how to do
Yeah.
that, right? And so that was kind of like the
It's
correlation. And
interesting.
yeah, it was really interesting. And when I was 14, we moved and I did this whole let me try out for sports and like make friends in the new high school,
Uh-huh.
right? And I made the cheer squad and the soccer team.
Okay.
So I was super excited,
Yeah.
except for then they send you this form home and you're like, okay, you're responsible for like $1,000 a team. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to come up with $2,000 in like 5 minutes? And so I thought, okay, let me figure out a way to make this money. But no one hires you at
Right,
14.
right.
Turns out you need a worker's
Yeah.
permit and a ride
Yeah.
and. And so I thought, all right, well, let me go figure it out. So I have two younger sisters, 10 and 11 years younger than myself, and they were at an elementary school across the street. So I made like old school computer paper with the
Oh
bubbles on the
yeah.
side.
Yeah.
I made business cards with my sister's magic markers, like old school Crayola markers, Trixie's tutor time. And I walked across the street to the principal and he gave me a shot. He kind of paid it forward and I explained to him, this is what I'm doing. Can you introduce me to the teachers? And he did. And within 30 days, I was making more money than both my parents combined.
Really?
And I realized, oh my gosh, where there's a will, there's a
Yeah.
way, but more than just a will and a way, like you got to really stop and think about it and work smart. And I realized if I made my sweet spot the second and third graders, I could hire my mom to drive me to other schools and
Oh.
expand. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened. And so kind of taking those lessons, right? I wanted to go and teach myself banking and figure out the real estate thing and went and walked into a Wells Fargo, who I'm still very dear friends with, all the Wells Fargo groups, and asked them for a job. And they gave me a job as a teller, and I was the world's worst teller. And it's not a very complicated thing, and I overcomplicated. But what I learned there was my largest depositors were in real estate, tech, or gambling. So I thought, okay, tech is still new, right? I'm on a BlackBerry. Real estate, I remember, right? And let me go figure this out. And gambling, I'm not trying to go to jail for counting cards. So real estate it is, right? So I wanted to get to know these real estate investors and developers and get them to help me understand how they were doing this. And in those days, they were going to the courthouse steps. They were hiring college kids with wads of cashier's checks to go and buy these distressed assets, right? These REO, and fix them up and sell them. And I thought, this is really interesting. I wonder if we could become a debt partner to them, because I knew that the Fannie and Freddie guidelines where you could only have up to 10 properties, right? And so I thought, this is interesting. These guys are at scale. They're doing 75, 100, 125 of these a month.
Wow.
It's a whole thing,
Yeah.
right? And so I realized, okay, there isn't a way to do this, right? That was conventional. And I was looking at something was more B2B. And so somehow found my way to the CEO of Wells Fargo. And I think he thought I was there to babysit his kids. And he's like, hey, my wife will be here in a few minutes. And I'm like, no problem, but I actually have a meeting with you, right? And I tell him this great idea. And we, Wells Fargo, we should be doing this, right? And being young and stars in my eyes, I think what I heard was, that's a great idea. Go build it. Right. I'm sure what he probably said was like, who let you in here?
Right.
But it was such a great thing because I really set out to do just that. So I realized, like, okay, like, let me figure this out. Let me go and do every aspect of the job. Let me be the originator, the processor, the underwriter, the biz dev,
Yeah.
right? The capital raiser. And realizing like there were so many components. And if I was going to raise money and take an oath that was important to me of a fiduciary responsibility of someone else's money, I needed to make sure I was the best at it, right? So I went out and did it today, what we call fractionalized lending. Today we call crowdfunding.
Right.
And, and I told you where I didn't have exposure to high net worth individuals or family offices. So it was old school, figuring out how to get there, how to be the best, because I realized very quickly that all the love in the world from my family was amazing, but that didn't create opportunities and exposure, right? What it did create was a confidence and belief in myself to be able to say, okay, I'm going to get out there. And there's a universal language of people like to make money.
Yeah.
And I realized everyone speaks that
Right,
language.
right.
So let me go get good at that, right? And so in real estate, you have the opportunity to diligence and to really establish yourself. And that's exactly what I did. And I set out to start this company, and it was me, a phone, and a desk. And there I was. And I'm like, I'm doing it. And my mom was so mad. In Spanish, we say, dio el grito al cielo, which means like you could hear her screaming all the way in the
Oh,
heavens, right? Because she was like, I came to this country and you have a job at the bank. Like, how could you walk away from that?
hmm.
And I said, well, mom, I went to school and I learned very quickly that this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because necessity, right? They say is the mother of innovation.
Yep.
It's so true. And I realized like hour two of being on my own that like I'm a people person and I'm
Mm.
going to go crazy just sitting here by myself. Let me go figure this out and let me build a team. And my first employee was 14 years old. She was working for a prom dress. She walked into my brother's gym at the time. He was in the fitness industry and said, hey, I need to make money for a prom dress. I happened to be walking by and said, prom dress, how old are you? What's happening? Who's the boy? Where's your mom? What's
Right.
happening? Right. Don't work for him, come work for me. And so that was my first
And what
employee.
was that role within your company?
So we didn't really know roles, right? We were kind of doing this,
Okay.
but I taught her the processing piece because I had to go out and originate
Right.
the business, right? And I had to go raise the money and kind of couple it. And this was pre-securitization. So in our space, my loans were paying off in 3 to 4 months.
Mm.
Well, Wall Street wasn't ready for that. Wall Street wasn't going to come buy one loan from
Right.
me or two loans from me. And they certainly didn't want to go and do all of this diligence for something that turned so quickly. Now it's an asset class, it's a thing, and
Right.
it's normal.
What year
But
was
back
this
then,
that you were doing this, started this?
oh, so I started and trained myself since 2000, launched my company, Genesis Capital, December of 2007, went to market January 2008, and then the world fell apart.
Yeah, that's
Then the
interesting.
downturn happened.
Yes.
The downturn happened and the world fell apart. And all I saw was that's okay. I'd rather get it out of the way now, right? Because real estate is cyclical.
Yeah.
So let me figure out how to capitalize on this and how to be the best in the space. And it was just a little engine that could, right?
Yeah.
And then in 2011, 2012, I put together a sister company called Genesis Auctions, which was the online auction company. So I would sell the distressed real estate. So my clients on that side were like Bank of America, Fannie, Freddie, HUD, these large banks and institutions. And on this side, it was the local regional developers, right? That I was going old school, grassroots,
Yeah.
going in, opening up a territory, staying there for a month, getting to know everybody, very, very localized regional kind of play. And really aligned myself as a debt partner and decided to call Wells Fargo back and say, hey guys, this is what I'm doing. Can you help me raise a big bucket of money?
Mm.
And they did.
Wow.
They absolutely did, and got Oak Tree to give me my first 250 million in equity, which was great. Except for I'm like, guys, I'll be back. Like, I need more money, please, because I'm going to deploy this a month. And that's exactly what happened. And we grew that company, leaps and bounds, and got it to over a couple $1 billion a
Wow.
year of loans and paper without, I was like sub 50 basis points default, which was great. Grew the other auction company alongside it. So if you can imagine, I had an entire like 17th floor and I'm like practically roller skating between the companies. And on that side, I realized, well, the market is shifting. I need to go and get there faster. So I went and I merged with a company called Hudson Marshall. They had been around for many years. They were actually the first auctioneers of distressed real
Mm.
estate. Merged with them, and we together scaled that in a very significant way. And we sold that to Fidelity. And then 9 months later, closed on a transaction for the original company, the lending company that I started with the phone and a desk, to Goldman Sachs.
Wow.
So it goes to show, right? Like the dreams do come true.
Yeah.
And it was great. And it was an amazing run. And my original team is still with me today. We're all
That
great friends
14-year-old
and
girl?
chosen family. Yeah, yeah. And we ended up hiring her best friend, who was also a like minor, right? And child labor laws broken every which way to Sunday. And we all still work together. They clearly don't need me. They can,
Yeah.
run circles around everybody, but it's been really an incredible experience to really not just build companies. These are two that, I get asked about all the time, and they're like my babies, if you will, but so many,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so many of them have come as a result of a problem or a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And then looking at it and thinking, okay, if I have this challenge, I'm going to make the assumption others do too. How do I solve for it for me? And how do I solve for it at scale? And, all of these opportunities kind of just self-created as you're in it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer that a lot of it is how you choose to look at
Yeah.
it.
Did you go to college?
Yes, I did. I went to school and I thought I wanted to be a therapist,
Okay. Yeah.
which is funny because one of the younger sisters I told you about is a
Okay.
therapist, right? And I was like, yeah, I don't have the patience to help people like guide to find their problem. I just want to fix the problem. Just come on, let's
Yeah.
go.
So then you go to college, you got a 4-year degree, and you
Yep.
started doing that work while you were in college, or
Yes.
okay, kind of to
Hmm.
pay your way through school and do all that.
Yep.
And then you kind of
Yep.
saw that there was opportunity and money to be made. And so you're like, why would I go be a therapist when I could just keep
Yeah.
scaling the
Yeah.
businesses that I've already grown?
Yeah. And I really thought I want to build some platforms that are meaningful where I can be a value add to the next person, right?
Hmm.
To the next young Trixie that can say, hey, she looks like me. She sounds like me. Like on paper, I wasn't going to fit the mold. I knew that the minute I went to the capital markets to raise money,
Right.
right? Like I knew that and I understood that. And I thought, like that could be your superpower.
Yeah.
Being different and being outside of the norm can be your superpower. And I'm going to go crack this thing open.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's interesting to me too that it's just like the right experience, like your mom cleaning for somebody who then you saw as like, these are also immigrants, right?
Right.
And they have had success. So I know that it's possible now. Before, maybe, it's like, okay, my family just works and you work hard and then you come home and you sleep, you retire, then you die. Like that's just what you have. But because you were exposed to like, oh
Yep.
wait, there's another way or there's another option, kind of gave you that planted that seed essentially that started to, grow and obviously inspire you to become who you are today. What were some of the things early on that you struggled with as an entrepreneur? There's a lot of things that get in our way because maybe we're talented in a particular area, but in another area, we're kind of weak. And someone who's maybe really creative is bad at business. And someone who's really good at business is maybe bad at creativity and,
Mhm.
and things like that. What were some of your hurdles that you had to overcome earlier on kind of in your development and building your career?
So pretty much you name it, and I've experienced it and had the challenge, right? So I made every mistake in the book. I really did. And I'm so grateful for most of them because it taught me. But I will tell you that something that I had to learn quickly was we're all going to be good at certain things, like you said, and we're all going to have a blind spot, right? We need to develop a team of people, whether these are trusted advisors, family, friends, whomever, right? That are going to be aware of that and help you. And so one example I can give you is one of my major blind spots was the people aspect,
Mm,
right? Because here I am, very, very tenacious, very resilient. Like you're going to push me down. I'm going to get back up. You're going to tell me I can't come in through the door. I'm going to go in through the window. All of those are great in
mm-hmm.
business. However, not everybody who tells you they're going to do something or want to be successful or want it are going to put in the behavioral and the actions behind it. And
Mm,
I think for me, I would get so taken by the person who I thought they could be and
yeah.
all of these great things that I wanted for them, right? That I sometimes missed. Yeah, but what have you done to warrant that, right? Like, are you qualified for these things, right?
Mm,
And so the translation of somebody wanting something or telling you they did and then putting them in a specific role that they're just not qualified or cut to do or in the mindset to do it
mm-hmm.
was a really big shift for me because I thought, oh, how could anyone not want it as badly as
Right.
I do, right? Or as badly as they're telling me. And so that was a blind spot for me. So once I realized that, I really kind of peeled the onion back and I realized a lot of my decisions where I screwed up in business or where I didn't scale as quickly and I had operational challenges were as a result of the belief that the person was better than they
Mm,
were. So I kind of got a team behind me through the years that were going to point that out and be like that little spidey sense for me. And that's just one example. I mean, there's so many, right? Then making sure that everything that you really know your numbers, right? Because as an entrepreneur, it was run, 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 go, 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 build, build, build. Okay, you're going to throw me a problem. Okay, great. Next problem, right? And so it's not
yeah.
like people are calling you to say, hey, how's your day going? Right? There's always something that is needed or something that needs your attention. And I think taking a step back and realizing, hey, wait a second, I am the business,
Mm-hmm.
right? Without me, the engine doesn't go.
Yep.
I need to invest in myself and take a minute to make sure that what I'm working on is really the most effective and best use of my time to get to the goal,
Yeah.
right? And so if I didn't stop that, I would stop and do that often. I would get caught up with the noise, whether the noise was challenges and hurdles and obstacles, because there's always something to do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or whether the noise was outside noise saying negative things like it's not going to happen. It's because remember that in my industry it didn't exist, right?
Right.
It hadn't happened. So we were very much pioneering something, and it was different. And different doesn't always translate to everybody as good. Now, the story is, oh, well, I knew you could do it. I always believed in
Right.
you, right? And I'm like, yeah, except for I hold grudges a little bit.
Right.
But no, I mean, once I could kind of take a step back and realize, okay, these are the 5 things I'm setting out to do. And if it doesn't fit in that bucket, it's just a distraction. You're able to translate that into, all of it.
So what were the things that did you start to adapt, saying when you started looking to hire people into roles or to help partner with you, and then you'd find out that they weren't as dedicated or hardworking or motivated, and you probably made some bad decisions and had to have difficult conversations and fire people or whatever that might look like. What have you done over the years to kind of combat that? Or how do you put someone through a litmus test to see if they're going to be a good team member or somebody who is going to gel with your energy?
Well, what I realized is I'm really good at identifying superstars that are entrepreneurs. Okay. Because it takes one to know one.
Yeah.
So you see these
The X factor.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. So but it took me forever to figure this out. Right. Cause I was a kid, but what I realized is I liked everybody. So it was kind of like, okay, yeah, sure. Like, let's figure it out. And that was almost sometimes a bad thing because it had nothing to do with whether they were likable or whether they were pleasant. It had to do with we were creating widgets, right? In banking, it's a widget. It's going to be these A, B, C, and D. And I had to really have others come in and help test that, right? Create an environment where when they're doing the interview, number one, I have to be the last person that interviews, right? So versus in the beginning, which I thought, let me be the first person, make sure they're fit for the culture and all the things. What I realize is, no, the team is the one that is setting the culture with me, right? The team is going to be able to tell me, yes, in a day-to-day, what they're doing will be helpful to me in these ways. And so just little things like that, like the interview process being the last one, being able to not just make a decision because it's a knee-jerk decision and we have an order, a deadline or a hurdle to meet, and being a little bit more thoughtful and forward thinking and taking more time for the hiring. Because
That's so
oftentimes
hard. That is so hard because it's
so
like
hard.
You want to fill somebody into a role, or you can see the potential of like, man, if I can just get somebody in this role and we start doing X, Y, and Z, we can have massive growth and success. And so a lot of times it's like you interview 3, 4, 5 people and you're like, yeah, I think this person will be good. I didn't get any red flags right away. And then you get them in the seat, and then maybe a couple weeks go by and they start to get in their groove, and then you start to see some things where you're like, I'm not going to bring any. This is my thing. It's like I'll get somebody in, and then it'll be like, well, it's just they're new. Let me just give them a little bit more chance, And then it's like, I don't want to embarrass them by calling them out on this thing or whatever. And I just start letting things slide, and then I start to resent that person a little bit, and I start to get a little irritated with them, and then it'll be like, I should have just fired them a month ago when I had this issue come up, or at least should have put them on like some sort of performance improvement plan and said, hey, you're not picking up the ball where I need you to here, or this happened in a client meeting and that's not how we approach things, or blah, 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 whatever the scenario is. And it's like you hang on to something longer than you should. And so that's always hard, though. It's one of those things where on one hand, you want to be a nice person and you want to give somebody a chance. And the other hand, you got to be a ruthless business person who's like trying to grow something.
Right. And like everyone has an opportunity to prove to themselves and each other and to you that they want to do it, right? And so I learned quickly, you do the good things slowly and the bad things quickly.
Yeah. There's that saying. What is it like hire slow and fire fast?
Yeah, that's so true. And it takes a while. It takes a while of just having all the feelings that you just described and falling down a couple of times, and taking it so personal, right? Because we're spending all of our time. You take it so to heart. It's not you on one hand, we're like, okay, it's great that we're passionate because the passion drives, right? But like, you can't just turn it off. And so there were times that I had to kind of step back and say, okay, this is a me issue. Like they are who they are. They told me who they were. I chose not to see it or hear it, right? So I now have to deal with the aftermath of it. And after doing that enough times, I was like, okay, let me solve for this. I don't like this so much.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I think one of the hardest parts as a leader in an area where I think a lot of young leaders can grow. And even myself, it's just like this area of doing the hard things well, essentially, and not being afraid to, and being at peace with that, and coming from a place of love, but also from a place of you have a mission and a job that you're trying to accomplish, and you can't really cut corners if you're going to get there.
Right. And taking the people part out of it, like really looking at it, for me, it was like, okay, these are the jobs, these are the things that have to get done and the roles that have to be filled. Forget the people, start over, right? Who is going to be the best for the job? Who's going to help you get there and get it in a succinct fashion?
Yeah. So what were some of those, in the kind of work that you do, what are some of the roles that were really successful in helping you scale and grow and move faster?
So I think that having your numbers people close to you, right, whatever that looks like in your organization, and really being transparent with them is key, because they're going to look at the world very differently and yet similarly than we do as entrepreneurs, or than I do, for example. So I would always gut reaction, intuition first, data second, right? And there's a way to combine those two, right? So that you can be smarter in your approach. Well, when I'm first starting out in business, you're just doing this. You're just trying to make something work, right? You're not looking at the data, and you're not looking at all of these other components and pieces. And as I started to grow up and grow in the business, I realized, you know what? Let me let the professionals do what the professionals do. In other words, I'm not going to go to a restaurant and go in the kitchen and start doing what the chef needs to do. That's what the chef's an expert in, right? So let the pros do. Why am I now trying to, be an expert in all things? Let me bring them alongside with me from the beginning, because otherwise I'm cutting their legs off, right? Otherwise I'm saying to them, oh, guess what? We did this deal and da 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 da. And they're playing catch up rather than being there to kind of help safeguard the entire way. So as I learned, I grew to bring some of these trusted advisors with me. And it was really neat, because it also set a different culture where I kind of took that all the way throughout the companies. So anyone that was tied to my lending company, for example, I wanted them to get to know the borrowers and the areas and why. Maybe not all of them, but really understand what you do today impacts all these other people's businesses, right? And their cash flows. And so I would say align yourself and really let your team help be that kind of safeguard with you, especially your numbers team, right? Whatever that looks like. Legal, of course, is a given, but I would say that I saw true growth bringing all of these worlds together. So typically you've got sales and ops, and they're like this, right? They're not always as aligned. So bringing everybody together from the beginning, you still have to be the boss. Someone's got to call the shots, right? But bringing them together and making it more of a collaborative thing was helpful. For example, we were going through some growth challenges and the world was changing. Right. And the world's changing and changing. And I know we have to change with it. I realize I don't know everything. Now the companies are like, at mass, they're big. So it's not the same as when it's, 7 or 8 people.
Right.
And I thought, okay, let me take every department, let me switch it around, and let me create a Shark Tank type of environment for a month. And let's have everybody collaborate, but not teams that are normally working together. Like switch them up, mix everybody in, and let's bring a challenge that you're having and some solutions. And I brought outside people, outside friends of mine from different industries as the judges. And it was one of the most fun events that we did. But we created 17 additional revenue lines of revenue that we didn't have as a result of the teams getting together. So it goes to show that you can do everything as a leader, but you're not going to catch everything. You have to be able to give your team the shot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such good advice, and I think an area where people who really want to grow to the next level have to learn how to work themselves out of the business and allow other people who are experts in those areas do their thing. And I think there's an element too of sometimes, especially when you start a business and you're spinning all the plates and you're doing all the work, a lot of times maybe you do have a skill set or something that you do that's working in the business that's your talent and that's your gift. And you have to be able to recognize maybe you need to bring somebody else in to actually be the visionary or kind of the CEO role of the company to kind of run things, because maybe that's not your strong suit. And so it's trying to understand when that is and at what point do you kind of transition to those things. So what kind of stuff are you doing now? Like what is your energy focused on? What are you trying to achieve in this next phase of life?
I'm always a lender, so still a lender. Anything, investment, real estate, I'm there, whether it's ground up, bridge, or, portfolio home. So I'm always, that's like, it's just a part of me now. Can't help myself. But I'm also very, very pro housing and very pro businesses and entrepreneurs. So I teamed up with a gentleman. He has a company called Verify, and he's from the merchant services world. So he combined AI, right, machine learning AI, and merchant services, and comes in and does these reports for anyone that accepts credit card services, anyone accepts credit card payments, and lowers their fees, typically 20 to 40%. Wow. They don't have to change anything. He's not trying to push a process or a product. He's literally coming in and here's a diagnostic example of here's where you are, here's what you're paying, here's what you should be paying. And if you want us to, we'll negotiate. Nobody takes $1 unless we're saving you money. So I was shocked at how much of an unregulated industry, right? And how that whole thing worked. So naturally, being a fixer, I was like, oh, I like this. Yeah. Let me put money into entrepreneurs' pockets. So that's very cool. I love that. I'm also working on a real estate investment platform that democratizes real estate investing. Okay. That comes as a result of all of these years wanting to help, right? And wanting to provide a level playing field where someone like my mom would have the same opportunities as someone like you or me that are involved in business on the day-to-day, and anyone can go ahead and invest with $100 or more and make the double-digit returns, right? So to me, that's huge. So I teamed up with a group out of Georgia, a father-son team. They're amazing, and that's what they do. And we've got like 7,500 investors now that even if they don't own their own home, they're investors in real estate. Cool. So all sorts of really cool, like meaningful things that I can feel like, oh my gosh, I can add value, right? And I invest across all platforms. So you name it, and I've been in it, from soccer teams to mobile pet to Meta to, it's always the person that captivates me, right? Because I do all the analytics just like everybody else would. But at the end of the day, when the chips are down and when it gets tough, who's the person that's going to roll up their sleeves and say, hey, I'm going to get in there and get it done? And that's the person I want to be aligned with.
Totally. Yeah, that's key for sure. Do you have a family? Do you have kids?
Yes, I do. I have 2 little boys, 6 and 4. So they're the real bosses and they're incredible. Yep. So it's been a lot of fun, and they definitely, I see the world differently, right? It's a very different experience going to the park, say, as a grown up, and seeing it through their eyes. So it's really neat to get to have this opportunity to be a mom. And I waited till after I sold my companies to be able to have my children, and I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? I mean, I feel like especially women have a lot of pressure. I think there's 2 kind of issues that I see from the outside. One is that women are told, like, hey, go get a job, climb the corporate ladder, and do all these things, and put your family on the side. Or they're told, like, oh, if you have a family, you really can't do these other things. And so I guess from your perspective, what are your thoughts about that? Because in my mind, I mean, I have 3 kids, and I know that they're just one of the greatest things that I've ever done with my life. And I can look back and say, man, what a great investment. Like, this was extremely difficult and very hard, but it's also been amazingly rewarding and makes life so much more sweet. And so I would always encourage someone, like, man, you should have kids. I know it's not easy, but it's actually extremely rewarding, to have those. So how do you balance the career and being a mom and doing all those things?
Well, I will tell you, it is a real thing. It's a real challenge. And a lot of people like to gloss over it. And it's impossible to, because it is exceptionally hard on women, right? And it's, if you're not in there and working harder and it's almost like sometimes the boat will pass you by and some of the opportunities are missed. And so what I did was make sure that women had a very secure footing in any company I was involved in and am involved in. That's a given thing. and also I really planned things out. And I know life is not a
Yeah.
plan, but when you look at the world and you take a step back, I didn't want to set myself up for a position of failure. So at a time when a lot of women were going in and having kids at that age, I was building companies and birthing companies. And I knew that and I understood that.
Yeah.
So I went and I got insurance just like anyone else. And it's called freezing your eggs. And a lot of women don't talk about that. And I tell anyone, you get insurance for everything else.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you also do it on this, right? But it wasn't a thing. And so, and it's something that I tell women all the time, like, look, you don't have to do it, just know that it's an option available
Right.
to
Interesting.
you. And I'm so grateful because it took some of the pressure off, and it also took some of the pressure off because a lot of times you grow up a lot, right? And you grow up a lot during these transitions. And sometimes, you may not want to be in a relationship that you were in your 20s or what have you. And so it changes the narrative for you in your head, right? So I tell women all the time, just take a minute to plan out what you want and safeguard as best as you can against that, right? And be transparent with your people, right? So if you're wanting to have kids and you can talk and you have that type of a relationship with your employees or whatever, like, let's just plan for it. You literally just put a plan in
Yeah.
place to be able to do that. And the more I think that we take some of the taboo out of it for women, the easier it is. And so I'm very open about it because I couldn't have been happier with my decision,
Yeah.
right? And I'm so grateful that I was able to do that. And I tell women all the time, like, you don't just have to just follow the norm, right? Like, if I had followed the norm, wouldn't be here today,
Right.
right? Because all of the, people try and set your life for you, and that's great. They're well intended, but it doesn't mean that it's the right thing for you. And if your businesses are extremely important to you, just like you plan for your business, just keep in mind you are the business. So plan for you, plan for those kids, plan for that enjoyment, and make yourself remember that, like, these kids, if you do decide to have them, are worth your time too. And I always am a big believer in involving them in what you're doing, so that it's not this, oh my gosh, this is taking my mom away.
Right.
No, it's the contrary. It's, oh wow, I can do this with my mom, and my mom can do anything, right?
Yeah.
And I can do anything.
That's so cool. That's so cool. So what do you see, just to get a little insight from an expert, what do you see the industry, like, how do you see it changing? I mean, it seems like we're in a really tough season again, right? Like '08, where it was like our homes are being foreclosed. Obviously, there was a lot of junk loans and a bunch of stuff that was going on that needed regulation back in the day, that they've changed now. But now we got interest rates are really high. We're coming into election year. I mean, what do you see as far as the industry of a good time for someone to invest or to, start thinking about? I mean, in Denver, I'm sure LA too, right? It's like, it's expensive. Like, the markets are nuts right now. And growing up here, you see a home that sells for $1 million and you're like, what? That is not $1 million neighborhood. There's no water slide and, massive 30-car garage. Like, how is this $1 million house? So what do you see as far as that goes? Is there any hope for people out there who are in the mortgage business and or someone who wants to buy a home? Like, what do you see the future looking like?
So I'm a big believer that when the chips are down, there's even more opportunity, right? And I'm living proof of it. And I will tell you, real estate is an evergreen opportunity. And so there's always opportunity. It's just sometimes there's more of like you have to do more diligence to find it, right? You have to work a little bit harder to find it. And to your point, it's always cyclical. It's always changing. There's always opportunities, right? And the world changes so quickly with the election coming up. The Fed is now going to be lowering rates. But when people really take a step back, right, there's always this give and take, right? The home prices come down, the home prices come up, interest rates go up, interest rates go down. But yet a lot of these groups are great examples to us because they've been doing this for 25, 30 years through every cycle, right? So it kind of goes to show that sometimes they pivot, sometimes they switch from like single family, say, to multifamily or vice versa. But if you take the time to kind of look for opportunities across the board and then decide what you're comfortable in, right? And seek wise counsel, seek people that are doing it effectively, right? There's so many people out there that are telling you they're doing it, but actually look at their track record. Actually dive into what have they actually made money? Not just I've flipped 100 homes. Okay, but how many of those made you money, right? And what do the numbers look like, and work backwards? You can find opportunity. And I'll tell you, in down markets, right? And in high interest, there's more opportunity at times, right? And so this time is a little bit different in the cycle because in '08, they didn't have equity in their
Right.
homes. This time, there was a lot of equity in the home. So there's more wiggle room for the homeowner and oftentimes. And, this time we had COVID. So it wasn't as a result of all of these factors that were in the lending world, although those come into play as well. There's a lot more exposure now, I think, to bad practices, which is great for the consumer and very helpful. And I think that is something that we wouldn't see as many real estate opportunities today if that hadn't taken place. So super grateful for that. But I see a market right now where, to your point, you take a step back, you look at what your cash position is, you look at what you can, invest in, and then you find the markets, right? You look at the emerging markets, you look at what kinds of jobs are coming in, right? Looking at these market trends, the schools, all of these things that tap into real estate investments. Doesn't have to be in your own backyard, right? Doesn't have to be that you make an investment in LA because you live in LA, for example. You can, right? But you can do it across the country. And we have so many tools now as a result of technology that you can have eyes everywhere, right? And that wasn't a possibility 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Wasn't a possibility 10 years ago. You had to physically be the person, okay, you have a water leak, okay, and
Right.
it's the world's changed, so we can kind of grow with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. What are some resources, or what are some things that helped you out? Like, what are some things you look back on, whether it's a book you've read or, coaching that you got or whatever it was? What are some things that you look back and you tell people, oh, you need to make sure you read this book or make sure you watch this, series or whatever that might be? What are some of those things that have made a positive impact in your life over the past 15 years that you would give as resources to other people?
So I would say always be learning. So literally, like, you'll laugh, but I have like my little black book all the time and I'm constantly taking notes. And if I'm not taking notes, I'm in the wrong room. Meaning if I'm the smartest person in the room, find a new room. Because there is something synergistic about business owners getting together, right? Or entrepreneurial or leaders getting together. Anyone that wants to excel and propel themselves forward. I learned the most from people. So I made it a point to go and create access for myself and to go and learn from others. And so when I first started, it was going to Rotary clubs, right? Because who has time to go to a Rotary club at lunchtime? How can I gain knowledge? How can I learn? Going to people that were trusted advisors, going to professors, whomever. I tell people all the time, like, try and level yourself up so that you can continue to learn, because we can do anything and everything. But if someone's already done it and can give you the, hey, be careful, watch out for kind of talk, it makes a huge difference. And usually my experience is business owners that have had any form of success are super eager to pay it forward. They're super eager to tell you their story and to say, hey, listen, watch out for this, or vet out this carefully, and take your time getting to really understand what your own business needs are. I didn't do that. I just kept running, going. And that's great if you're like running a race, right? That's wonderful. However, if you're trying to scale and grow a business, it doesn't mean that what we did 3 years ago is as effective today. And so take a step back. And I'm a big believer of like writing it out. Write out, where are your pain points and how can we tap into others that have excelled in that particular area, and be transparent with them. I've gained so much wisdom and knowledge from simply talking to other individuals that are not in my industry, right? Because that sometimes can be great, but that can be too myopic of a lens. But taking a step back and looking at, kind of wise counsel in other areas and how they've managed things. And you realize quickly that good business practices are good business practices, and they transcend all sorts of platforms.
Yeah. So work on building your network and your relationships and get yourself out there, because you never know who's gonna to show up in your life and that you'll be able to partner with and make a difference with. So I think that is great advice. If people wanted to connect with you and follow you and what things you're doing, where's a good place for that?
TrixieCastro.com. that would be the best bet to my website or Trixie Castro on social for sure.
All right. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for hanging out with us and sharing your knowledge and your story, which is just so inspiring. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are going to get some value from this conversation and be motivated to get out there, work hard, and build their relationship. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. And hey, thank you for listening to The Friday Habit. If you want to get show notes for this episode, you can go to thefridayhabit.com. You get the show notes. You can also get our link to the Friday Habit system that's going to show you how to spend more time working on your business instead of always in the business. If you want to reach out to us, you can email us at hello@thefridayhabit and tell us what you want to talk about. Maybe send us somebody you think would be a good fit for the show. And until next time, remember, live every day like it's Friday.